The gleaming marble floors of the Waldorf Astoria reflected the soft afternoon light streaming through the towering windows, creating patterns that danced across the luxurious lobby. Among the sea of designer suits, clicking heels, and the gentle murmur of wealth and privilege, a figure in simple dark jeans and a worn black t-shirt sat quietly in a corner chair, a paperback book resting in his hands. Most guests barely glanced his way. Why would they? In a place where appearances meant everything, where status was worn like armor and wealth was displayed like peacock feathers, this man seemed almost invisible. His dark hair fell casually across his forehead. His posture was relaxed, unhurried. He appeared to be just another ordinary person killing time in an extraordinary place. But Maria Santos noticed him immediately. Not because she recognized who he was, not yet, but because of something else entirely. In her 23 years of cleaning offices, hotels, and corporate buildings, Maria had developed an eye for people. She could tell the difference between those who saw her as a person and those who looked right through her as if she were part of the furniture. This man, reading his book with such focused attention, had smiled at her when she'd first entered the lobby area with her cleaning cart. Not the polite, dismissive smile most guests offered, but something genuine, something that acknowledged her as a human being worth acknowledging. Maria had been working at the Waldorf for 6 months now, and she loved this job more than any she'd ever had. The pay was decent, the work was steady, and most importantly, it helped her send money back to her family in Honduras while she saved for nursing school. Every day brought her one step closer to her dream of becoming a registered nurse, following in her mother's footsteps. She pushed her cart quietly across the marble floor, careful not to disturb the guests scattered throughout the lobby. The afternoon shift was usually peaceful. Most of the morning rush had cleared out, and the evening crowd hadn't yet arrived. It was during these quiet hours that Maria could really focus on her work, taking pride in ensuring every surface gleamed, every corner was spotless. As she worked her way around the seating area, she found herself stealing glances at the man with the book. There was something familiar about his profile, something that nagged at the edge of her memory. When he looked up to check his phone, she caught a better view of his face, and her heart nearly stopped. Those eyes, that jawline. She'd seen that face on movie posters, in magazines her teenage daughter Christina kept scattered around their small apartment. This wasn't just any guest. This was Keanu Reeves. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she continued dusting the nearby tables. Keanu Reeves. The actor her daughter absolutely adored. Christina had every Matrix movie memorized, had dragged Maria to see John Wick 3 times, and had a poster of Keanu on her bedroom wall right next to her graduation photo from high school. The irony wasn't lost on Maria. Here she was, in the same room as one of Hollywood's biggest stars, and she was wearing a gray uniform with her name embroidered on the pocket, pushing a cart full of cleaning supplies. In her daughter's eyes, she was in the presence of royalty. In the eyes of the hotel management, she was supposed to be invisible. But Maria had always believed that everyone deserved to be treated with respect and kindness, regardless of their station in life. It's what her mother had taught her, what she'd tried to instill in Christina. And Christina would never forgive her if she didn't at least try to get an autograph. Maria's mind raced as she debated with herself. Hotel policy was clear. Staff were not to approach guests for personal reasons. They were to be professional, courteous, but invisible unless needed. She'd seen other employees reprimanded for far less. But when would she ever get another chance like this? She thought about Christina's face when she'd told her about the time she'd cleaned George Clooney's hotel room and had been too nervous to say anything. The disappointment in her daughter's eyes had been heartbreaking. "Mama," Christina had said, "you're always telling me to be brave, to speak up for myself. Why didn't you speak up for me?" Taking a deep breath, Maria made her decision. The approach. She finished cleaning the area she was working on, then slowly pushed her cart closer to where Keanu was sitting. Her heart pounded in her chest as she rehearsed what she would say. She didn't want to disturb him, didn't want to be one of those people who interrupted someone's peaceful moment for their own gain. But this was for Christina. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves." Keanu looked up from his book, a well-worn copy of Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and met her eyes with that same genuine smile she'd noticed earlier. Yes? I'm so sorry to bother you, Maria began, her accent making her words sound softer, more musical. I know you're trying to read, and I don't want to interrupt, but my daughter is such a huge fan of yours. Her name is Christina, and she's 18. She's going to start college next month to study computer science because she was so inspired by The Matrix. Keanu's smile widened, and he carefully marked his place in the book before setting it aside. That's incredible. Computer science, that's fantastic. What's her name again? Christina, Maria said, surprised by how easily he engaged with her, how his full attention was now focused on their conversation as if she were the most important person in the room. Christina, Keanu repeated, as if testing how the name felt. That's a beautiful name. And she's going to study computer science because of The Matrix? That's amazing. You know, when we made that movie, we never imagined it would inspire young people to go into technology. That's really special. Maria felt her nervousness begin to fade. She'd expected him to be polite but distant, maybe a little annoyed at the interruption. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in hearing about Christina. She would absolutely die if she knew I was talking to you right now, Maria said with a laugh. I was wondering, and please don't feel like you have to say yes, but would it be possible to get an autograph for her? I know you must get asked this all the time, and I completely understand if you'd rather not. Of course, Keanu said immediately, already reaching into his jacket pocket for a pen. I'd be happy to. Do you have something for me to sign? Maria's face fell slightly. In her nervousness, she hadn't thought about what he could actually sign. Oh, I didn't bring anything. I wasn't planning on this. I just saw you and thought. She looked around desperately, then brightened. Wait, I have my notebook. She pulled out a small spiral notebook she used to keep track of her cleaning schedule and supply needs. Perfect, Keanu said, accepting the notebook. What should I write? Whatever you want, Maria said. Just maybe mention her name. She would treasure anything from you. As Keanu began writing, neither of them noticed the approach of Harold Pemberton, the hotel's assistant general manager. Harold was a man who prided himself on maintaining the Waldorf's impeccable reputation for service and discretion. He was also a man who believed that rules existed for a reason, and that employees who couldn't follow simple guidelines had no place in an establishment of this caliber. Harold had been watching the interaction from across the lobby, his face growing more disapproving by the moment. This was exactly the kind of behavior that cheapened the hotel's image. Guests came to the Waldorf to escape the outside world, to enjoy privacy and luxury. They didn't come to be harassed by starstruck employees. Excuse me, Harold's voice cut through the conversation like a blade. Both Maria and Keanu looked up to see a man in an expensive suit bearing down on them, his face tight with barely controlled anger. Mr. Reeves, I sincerely apologize for this interruption, Harold said, his voice dripping with practiced charm, even as his eyes shot daggers at Maria. I can assure you this behavior is absolutely not tolerated at our establishment. Keanu's eyebrows rose slightly, but he remained calm. Actually, there's no problem here. We were just having a nice conversation. Nevertheless, Harold continued, completely ignoring Keanu's words, our staff know better than to bother our distinguished guests. Maria, you need to return to your duties immediately. Maria's face burned with embarrassment. I'm sorry, Mr. Pemberton. You were just violating hotel policy, Harold snapped. This is completely unacceptable behavior. Keanu watched this exchange with growing concern. He could see the shame and fear in Maria's eyes, could feel the power dynamic at play. This was exactly the kind of situation that made him uncomfortable. Someone using their authority to humiliate another person for something that was, in his opinion, completely harmless. Listen, Keanu said, his voice taking on a firmer tone. I really don't see what the problem is here. Maria wasn't bothering me at all. In fact, I was enjoying our conversation. Harold barely glanced at Keanu, too focused on his prey. Mr. Reeves, I appreciate your graciousness, but we have standards to maintain. Maria, consider this your final warning. One more incident like this and you'll be looking for another job. The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Maria's face went pale. She couldn't lose this job. She had rent to pay, money to send home, tuition to save for. Christina was counting on her. "I understand, Mr. Pemberton," she whispered. "It won't happen again." The writing on the wall. But it was too late. Harold had made up his mind. Over the next 2 weeks, he watched Maria like a hawk, looking for any excuse to follow through on his threat. He criticized her work, questioned her schedule, and made her feel like she was walking on eggshells every moment she was at the hotel. The final straw came when Maria was cleaning the executive conference room and accidentally knocked over a small decorative vase while dusting. The vase didn't break, it was caught by the thick carpet, but Harold happened to walk by at that exact moment. "That's it," he declared. "This level of carelessness is exactly what I've been talking about. You're clearly not suited for a position that requires attention to detail." "Mr. Pemberton, please," Maria pleaded. "It was an accident. The vase isn't even damaged. I've been doing this job for 6 months without any problems." "Until you decided to start harassing our guests," Harold shot back. "I gave you a warning, and clearly you haven't taken it seriously. I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go." Maria felt the world tilt around her. "Please, Mr. Pemberton, I need this job. My daughter is starting college. I have family depending on me. I promise I won't talk to any guests again. I'll be completely invisible. I'm sorry, but the decision is final. Please collect your things and report to HR." 2 hours later, Maria walked out of the Waldorf Astoria carrying a small box with her few personal belongings, her uniform folded neatly on top. She'd worked so hard to get this job, had been so proud to work at such a prestigious hotel. Now she was back to square one, and all because she'd wanted to do something nice for her daughter. As she waited for the bus, tears streaming down her face, Maria pulled out the notebook where Keanu had written his autograph. She'd never even had a chance to give it to Christina. The note read, "Dear Christina, your mother tells me you're going to study computer science because the Matrix inspired you. That makes me incredibly proud and happy. The world needs more people like you who are willing to follow their dreams and use technology to make things better. Your mother seems like an amazing person, and I can tell she's very proud of you. Keep being excellent to each other. With admiration, Keanu Reeves." Below that, he'd added, "P.S. Your mom is pretty awesome. Hold on to her." Maria smiled through her tears. At least Christina would have this. At least something good had come from the whole experience. An unexpected return. What Maria didn't know was that Keanu had been thinking about their encounter ever since it happened. The way Harold had treated her, the fear in her eyes when she was threatened, the dignity with which she'd carried herself even in the face of humiliation, it had stayed with him. Keanu had dealt with enough Hollywood executives and corporate types to recognize Harold's type immediately. The man who confused authority with importance, who believed that maintaining standards meant treating certain people as less than human. It was everything Keanu despised about the entertainment industry and society in general. He'd tried to put it out of his mind, but he couldn't shake the image of Maria's face when Harold had threatened her job. She'd been terrified, and all because she'd been kind enough to think of her daughter. It didn't sit right with him. 3 weeks after the incident, Keanu found himself back at the Waldorf. He had business in the city and could have stayed anywhere, but he specifically chose to return to the hotel. He wanted to see Maria again, to check on how she was doing, maybe to apologize for the trouble his presence had caused her. When he asked for her at the front desk, the young clerk looked confused. "Maria Santos? I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have anyone by that name working here." "She was a cleaner," Keanu explained. "Works the afternoon shift, Hispanic woman, probably in her 40s, very kind eyes." The clerk's expression grew uncomfortable. "Oh, you mean the employee who was terminated a few weeks ago? I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide any information about former employees." Terminated. The word hit Keanu like a physical blow. They'd actually fired her. That pompous manager had actually followed through on his threat, and all because she'd asked for an autograph for her daughter. "I'd like to speak with Harold Pemberton," Keanu said, his voice taking on an edge that made the clerk nervous. "Mr. Pemberton is in a meeting right now, but I can get him." 20 minutes later, Harold Pemberton walked into the lobby with his characteristic self-important stride, ready to smooth over whatever minor inconvenience their VIP guest might be experiencing. He found Keanu sitting in the same chair where he'd first encountered Maria, but this time there was nothing relaxed about the actor's demeanor. "Mr. Reeves," Harold said with his practiced smile, "what a pleasure to see you again. I understand you wanted to speak with me. I wanted to ask you about Maria Santos." Harold's smile flickered slightly. "I'm afraid I can't discuss personnel matters with guests, but I can assure you that we've taken steps to ensure you won't experience any similar disruptions during your stay." "Disruptions?" Keanu's voice was quiet, controlled. "Is that what you call a polite conversation?" "Mr. Reeves, I appreciate your concern, but we have policies in place for a reason. Our guests expect a certain level of—" "You fired her." It wasn't a question. Harold shifted uncomfortably. "As I said, I can't discuss specific personnel decisions, but we maintain very high standards for professional behavior." Keanu stood up slowly, and suddenly Harold realized that this conversation was not going in the direction he'd anticipated. The actor was tall, imposing, and there was something in his eyes that made Harold take an involuntary step backward. "Let me tell you about professional behavior," Keanu said, his voice still quiet, but carrying the weight of barely contained anger. "Professional behavior is treating every human being with dignity and respect, regardless of their job title or position. Professional behavior is understanding that the person cleaning your hotel works just as hard as anyone in a boardroom, probably harder. Mr. Reeves, I understand you may feel. You understand nothing." Keanu's voice cut through Harold's attempt at deflection. "That woman was fired because she asked me for an autograph for her daughter. She was polite, respectful, and when you humiliated her in front of me, she took it with more grace than you've shown in this entire conversation." Harold's face was flushing red. This was not how conversations with VIP guests were supposed to go. "Sir, with all due respect, hotel policy clearly states—" "I don't care about your policy," Keanu said. "I care about the fact that you fired a hardworking woman for treating me like a human being instead of some untouchable celebrity. Do you have any idea what that job meant to her? What losing it might have cost her family? We can't make exceptions just because—" "Because what? Because I'm famous? Because I bring money to your hotel?" Keanu shook his head in disgust. "You know what the really sad part is? You think you were protecting me from some kind of inconvenience. But the truth is, that 5-minute conversation with Maria was the most genuine interaction I've had in this place. She saw me as a person, not as a commodity." Harold was starting to panic. This was rapidly becoming the kind of situation that could end careers, and he could see several other guests and staff members beginning to pay attention to their conversation. "Mr. Reeves, perhaps we could discuss this more privately in my office." "No," Keanu said firmly. "We're going to discuss this right here, right now. I want you to understand something. Your high standards are just an excuse for treating people badly. You hide behind policies and procedures to justify cruelty." The demand. Harold looked around nervously, acutely aware that their conversation was drawing more attention. A small crowd had gathered at a discreet distance, including several hotel staff members who rarely got to see management challenged so directly. "Mr. Reeves," Harold said, lowering his voice and trying to regain control of the situation, "I understand you're upset, but—" "I'm not upset," Keanu interrupted. "I'm disgusted, and here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Maria Santos and offer her job back, with full pay for the time she's been out of work, plus a formal apology." Harold's mouth fell open. I can't possibly. That's not how these things work. There are procedures, protocols. Then change them. Mr. Reeves, even if I wanted to, which I'm not saying I do, I don't have the authority to. Then find someone who does." Keanu's voice had gotten quieter, more dangerous. "Because I'm not leaving this hotel until this is made right. Sir, you can't seriously expect us to rehire someone based on what? Basic human decency? The fact that she did nothing wrong?" Keanu stepped closer to Harold, and the manager had to resist the urge to back away. "Let me ask you something. In all your years of hotel management, has anyone ever complained about Maria's work?" Harold hesitated. "Well, no, but has she ever been late, called in sick without reason, been rude to a guest, damaged property, stolen anything?" "No, but that's not the point." That's exactly the point. Keanu's voice rose slightly, causing more heads to turn. You fired an exemplary employee for having a polite conversation with a guest, not for doing anything wrong, not for failing at her job, but for treating me like a human being. By now, a small crowd had definitely formed. Hotel guests were pretending to read newspapers while listening intently. Staff members were finding reasons to linger in the lobby, and someone was almost certainly recording the conversation on their phone. Harold was sweating now. This was a public relations nightmare in the making. "Mr. Reeves, please, if we could just discuss this privately." "No." Keanu's voice carried across the lobby. "You humiliated Maria in public, so we're going to solve this in public. You're going to call her right now and offer her job back. I don't have her number. Find it." Harold looked around desperately, hoping for some kind of rescue, but found only curious faces staring back at him. "Mr. Reeves, even if I could contact her, there's no guarantee she would want to come back after. After you fired her for no good reason? You're right, she might have too much self-respect to work for someone like you. But that's her choice to make, not yours." The crowd was getting larger. Harold could see several people he recognized as local journalists, probably staying at the hotel or visiting the restaurant. This was going to be a disaster. "Sir, please," Harold said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "Can we at least discuss this in private? I'm sure we can come to some kind of arrangement." "The arrangement is simple," Keanu said. "Call Maria, offer her job back, apologize, that's it. And if I refuse," Keanu smiled, but there was no warmth in it, "then I'm going to stand here in your lobby and tell everyone who will listen about how the Waldorf Astoria fires employees for being kind to guests. I'll call every entertainment reporter I know, every social media platform, every talk show host. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of establishment this is." Harold's face went white. A scandal like that could destroy not just his career, but the hotel's reputation. The Waldorf's entire brand was built on luxury service and treating guests well. If word got out that they mistreated their own employees— "You wouldn't," Harold whispered. "Try me." The phone call. 20 minutes later, Harold sat in his office with shaking hands, a phone pressed to his ear. It had taken 3 calls to HR to get Maria's contact information, and each minute that passed had felt like an hour. Keanu sat across from him, having insisted on being present for the call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, a familiar voice answered. "Hello? Maria? This is Harold Pemberton from the Waldorf Astoria." There was a long pause. "Mr. Pemberton." Harold cleared his throat, acutely aware that Keanu was watching his every move. "Maria, I'm calling because, well, there's been a misunderstanding about your termination." "A misunderstanding?" Maria's voice was cautious, confused. "Yes, well." Harold looked helplessly at Keanu, who gestured for him to continue. "It appears that your dismissal was hasty, based on incomplete information." Another pause. "I don't understand." Harold wiped sweat from his forehead. "What I'm trying to say is that we'd like to offer you your position back, with full pay for the time you've been away, and a formal apology for any inconvenience." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Harold wondered if the call had been disconnected. Finally, Maria spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you serious?" "Yes, completely serious. We realize we made an error in judgment, and we'd very much like you to return." "But why? What changed?" Harold looked at Keanu again, who nodded encouragingly. "We had a chance to review the situation more thoroughly, and we realized that your interaction with Mr. Reeves was completely appropriate and professional. The fault was entirely on our end for mishandling the situation." "Mr. Reeves? Keanu Reeves?" Maria's voice was thick with emotion. Is he there?" Keanu gestured for the phone. Harold handed it over gratefully. "Hi, Maria, it's Keanu." "Oh my God!" Maria breathed. "Mr. Reeves, I can't believe. I thought I was in trouble because of you, and now—" "You were never in trouble because of me," Keanu said gently. "You were in trouble because some people think they can treat others badly and get away with it. But that's not going to happen, not on my watch." Maria was crying now, and Keanu could hear it in her voice. "I don't know what to say. I've been looking for work for 3 weeks and nothing. My daughter starts college next month, and I was so scared I wouldn't be able to help her." "You don't have to worry about that anymore," Keanu said. Your job is waiting for you, along with back pay and a sincere apology. When can you start? Tomorrow, right now, whenever they need me. Keanu smiled and handed the phone back to Harold. She'll start tomorrow, he told the manager, with a raise. A raise? Harold squeaked. For pain and suffering, Keanu said firmly. And you're going to personally apologize to her when she comes in. Harold nodded frantically. Of course, absolutely. Maria, you'll start tomorrow at your regular shift with a 10% increase in pay, and I'll be there personally to welcome you back. Thank you, Maria whispered. Thank you so much. I don't know how to. Just keep being the kind, hardworking person you are, Keanu said, taking the phone back one more time. And give Christina my regards. Tell her I hope computer science treats her well. After they hung up, Harold sat slumped in his chair, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. Are you satisfied? He asked weakly. I'm satisfied that Maria got justice, Keanu replied. But let me be clear about something. This isn't just about one employee. This is about how you treat all your employees. Maria told me she loved working here, which means there are other good people on your staff who deserve to be treated with respect. Harold nodded miserably. I understand. Do you? Because I get the feeling you still think this was about me throwing my weight around as a celebrity. It wasn't. It was about recognizing that every person who works in this hotel has dignity and worth, regardless of what they do or how much money they make. Keanu stood up and headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Harold, I'll be staying here regularly over the next few months while I'm filming in the city. I'll be watching how you treat your staff, all of them.